The last time you made a choice, you didn't. Think about it. This morning, you woke up, brushed your teeth with one of a dozen toothpaste brands, poured cereal from one of 50 boxes, drove past 100 different gas stations, and scrolled through news from a dozen different outlets. Every single step felt like freedom. It wasn't. What if I told you that the brands competing for your dollar aren't actually competing at all? What if the illusion of choice in America, the very foundation of our free market, is the most sophisticated lie ever sold to the public? And what if the people who control this lie have more power than any government on earth, and you've never even heard their names? This is the story of how a handful of shadow corporations quietly became the owners of everything. Your groceries, your home, your healthcare, your future, without a single American ever casting a vote. And by the end of this, you'll understand why some economists believe we're no longer living in a democracy at all. We're living in something far more dangerous. Walk into any American supermarket and just stop. Look around. The abundance is almost overwhelming, isn't it? An entire aisle dedicated to nothing but cereal. Dozens of different sodas chilling behind glass doors. 15 brands of orange juice, each promising to be fresher than the last. This is what freedom looks like, right? This is capitalism working exactly as intended, companies battling for your attention, driving prices down, innovating to win your loyalty. Now, let me show you what's really happening. You see Coca-Cola and Pepsi as bitter rivals, two giants locked in a century-long war for your taste buds. But pull up the shareholder filings, and something strange emerges. The same three institutional investors own massive stakes in both companies. The same entity profits, whether you reach for Coke or Pepsi. Okay, maybe that's just beverages. Let's try something else. You're choosing between United and Delta for your next flight. Surely these are independent companies fighting for your business. Check the ownership records. The same three investors are the largest shareholders in every major American airline. The competition is theater. The profits all flow to the same place. What about something really important, like your medication? Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson seem like separate pharmaceutical empires. They are not. The same three investors sit at the top of both. Your bank, whether you chose Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or JP Morgan Chase, congratulations. You chose the same owners. Still feel like you're living in a free market. Here's where it gets unsettling. These same institutional investors own the largest stakes in the media companies reporting the news about these very corporations. Fox, CNN, Disney, Comcast trace the money high enough and the names become familiar. Always the same names. The companies that manufacture your reality are owned by the same entities that own everything inside that reality. So, who are they? We'll get to that. But first, you need to understand that this shadow ownership isn't just about soda and cereal. It's about to take something far more precious. Your home. Picture this, a young couple in Phoenix, Arizona. Let's call them Sarah and Michael. They've done everything right, saved for 5 years, maintained perfect credit, lived below their means. They're finally ready to buy their first home, a modest 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Asking price, $420,000. They put in an offer, full asking price. They're hopeful. 24 hours later, their realtor calls with devastating news. They've been outbid. Someone paid $480,000, $60,000 over asking in cash. No mortgage, no inspection contingency, no human negotiation. Sarah and Michael never had a chance. They try again and again. Each time, the same story. Mystery buyers with unlimited cash, paying absurd premiums, closing in days. Finally, Sarah asks the obvious question, who keeps buying these houses? The answer will make you sick. In 2021, institutional investors purchased 1 out of every 7 homes sold in America's top metropolitan areas. In some Sunbelt cities, that number climbed to 1 in 4. These aren't families. They're not even wealthy individuals looking for vacation properties. They are algorithms automated buying systems operated by Wall Street firms and massive corporations that have decided real estate is the new gold rush. And the families getting displaced? They're not a bug in the system, they're the feature, because here's what nobody's saying out loud. The goal isn't just to buy real estate. The goal is to transform the entire American middle class into permanent renters. Think about what that means. Your parents' generation could work a regular job and buy a house, build equity, pass wealth to their children. That was the American dream, not a slogan, a mathematical reality. Now, an entire generation is being systematically priced out of ownership. And the rent they pay instead, it flows upward every single month to entities that already own more than you can possibly imagine. You will own nothing. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's a business model. But who's behind it? Who has the capital to buy 15,000 homes in a single quarter? Who can deploy billions of dollars through automated systems faster than any family can make a decision? The answer brings us to the most powerful players most Americans have never heard of. 3 names, 3 companies. The architects of a new economic order: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. In financial circles, they're known simply as the Big 3. And what they control defies comprehension. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers are almost impossible to believe. Combined, these 3 firms manage over $20 trillion in assets. 20 trillion, that's more than the entire annual economic output of the United States. It's more than the GDP of China. It's more than every country on Earth except America and China combined. If the Big 3 were a nation, they would be the 3rd largest economy in the world. But they're not a nation. They're private companies, accountable to no voter, subject to no election. And this is just the money they manage directly. Their actual influence extends much further, because here's what massive ownership really means. When you own that much stock in a company, you don't just collect dividends, you get votes, shareholder votes, the votes that decide who sits on corporate boards, what policies get implemented, which direction a company takes. The Big 3 are now the largest shareholders in roughly 90% of S&P 500 companies. Read that again. 9 out of 10 of America's largest corporations answer, ultimately, to the same 3 owners. Apple, they're the biggest shareholders. Microsoft, same. Amazon, Google, Meta, check. ExxonMobil, Chevron, the companies deciding America's energy future. The Big 3 sit at the top. Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical giants that became household names during the pandemic, controlled by the same investors. And here's where it becomes truly unnerving. They even own significant stakes in each other. Vanguard is one of BlackRock's largest shareholders. BlackRock is one of Vanguard's largest shareholders. The web of cross-ownership is so dense that financial regulators have struggled to even map it completely. What do you call it when supposedly competing entities are all controlled by the same small group? There's a word for that. It's called a monopoly. But this isn't a monopoly over one industry. This is a monopoly over the entire economy, and the people running it weren't elected by anyone. When you control the largest voting blocks in corporate America, your power extends far beyond investment returns. You can reshape the world without passing a single law. Want major corporations to change their environmental policies? You don't need Congress. You just need the shareholders to vote for it. Want to influence hiring practices across every industry? A few letters from institutional investors can accomplish what legislation never could. Want to shift corporate political spending in a particular direction? When you control the board seats, you control the checkbook. This is not theoretical. This is happening right now. In recent years, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has written annual letters to corporate executives outlining his expectations for their companies, environmental targets, social policies, governance standards. These letters aren't requests. When you're a company's largest owner, they're instructions. Some call this enlightened capitalism. Others call it unelected power, imposing its values on the entire economy without democratic input. But here's what should really concern you. The The big three don't just own companies, they've built systems that operate beyond human oversight entirely. In the basement of BlackRock's headquarters exists one of the most powerful machines on Earth. It's called Aladdin, not the Disney character. Aladdin is an acronym: Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. It's a supercomputer system that monitors risk for over $21 trillion in assets. Not just BlackRock's money, but assets from thousands of financial institutions around the world who subscribe to its services. Central banks use Aladdin. Pension funds use Aladdin. Insurance companies managing your future depend on Aladdin's calculations. Every day, this artificial intelligence system runs millions of risk simulations, tracks 200,000 trades, and monitors more securities than any human team could ever analyze. Financial decisions affecting billions of people flow through this single system. And here's the question no one seems to be asking. What happens when one algorithm has that much influence over global markets? What happens when the entity running that algorithm also happens to own significant stakes in almost every company being traded? You don't get transparency, you don't get accountability, you get something else entirely. Every 4 years, Americans go to the polls. We debate candidates, argue policies, and tell ourselves that our vote shapes the future. And in some ways it does, but consider this. Presidents come and go, senators serve their terms and retire. Even Supreme Court justices eventually leave the bench. But Larry Fink has been CEO of BlackRock since 1988. The leadership of Vanguard and State Street shows similar stability. These aren't temporary figureheads, they're permanent fixtures of power. The American government changes, the shadow owners do not. They've watched administrations rise and fall, they've adapted to every regulatory environment, they've grown larger under Democrats and Republicans alike, and with each passing year, control deepens, more companies bought, more real estate acquired, more of the economy flowing into the same 3 sets of hands. The question isn't whether this is happening, the evidence is public record. The question is, what happens next? What does a society look like when a handful of private institutions own everything? When competition is just performance? When the American dream is rented, not owned? We might not need to imagine it much longer, because here's what keeps economists up at night. Unprecedented concentration creates unprecedented vulnerability. When the big three's algorithms drive market decisions for trillions of dollars, they don't just respond to reality, they shape it. If Aladdin's risk models trigger a sell-off, markets don't gradually adjust, they crater, instantly, in unison. We saw echoes of this in March 2020, when financial markets experienced some of the fastest declines in history. We saw again in the banking stress of 2023, and we're building a system where these shocks will only become more severe. Because when everyone's following the same playbook, written by the same algorithm, owned by the same firms, diversity of thought disappears. The resilience that comes from true competition evaporates. What you're left with is a system optimized for efficiency that's terrifyingly fragile. A house of cards could collapse with a single miscalculation, and who pays when that happens? Not the big three, not the algorithms, not the executives who've never missed a bonus. You do. So, where does this leave us? You walked into that supermarket this morning believing you lived in a free country. With a free market, you believed your choices mattered, your voice counted, your hard work could still buy you a piece of the American dream. I'm not telling you those beliefs are foolish. I'm telling you they're under threat. The concentration of ownership we're witnessing has no precedent in American history. The Gilded Age robber barons controlled industries. The big three control the market itself. And unlike the Rockefellers and Carnegies of old, they've learned to operate in shadows. No mansions on the hill, no famous names in the headlines. Just quiet accumulation, year after year, until the question isn't whether they have too much power. It's whether there's any power left or for anyone else. The American government changes every 4 to 8 years. The big three do not. They have become an invisible government operating in parallel to the one you elect, answerable only to their shareholders and their algorithms. And now you know their names. The question is, what are you going to do about it? This is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The same concentration of power, The same hidden vulnerabilities exist throughout the global system, and some of them could bring the entire world economy to its knees overnight. If you want to understand just how fragile this machine really is, you need to see what happens when 21 miles of water controls the fate of civilization. Click the video on your screen now to discover the 21-mile choke point that could crash the world economy.